A to the K.
to the K.
To the K.
Hello, one and all. Welcome to the A to the K Wrestling Show. Today, we are joined by former two-time TNA World Champion, WWE United States Champion, Mr. Money in the Bank, and owner of the Academy School of Professional Wrestling, the one and only Ken Anderson. Ken, thanks so much for joining us, man. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being on. So we'd like to start, if we could, just by sort of, I suppose, asking sort of how you ended up in the crazy world of professional wrestling, and where you were a fan from a young age.
I was not a fan growing up. Briefly, when I was a kid, I remember watching Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling on Saturday mornings, and occasionally my dad would let me watch like Saturday night's Main Event, but I was not a regular observer. It wasn't until I was 20 years old, and a friend of mine who consistently watched wrestling, he would wear wrestling t-shirts, they would talk about it, and I gave him a hard time about it all the time. Like, what are you guys watching that crap for? And one night he just he kind of forced my hand and said, this is what we're watching tonight. Just keep an open mind, right? And then I happened to see Stone Cold Steve Austin for the first time, and it just sparked something in my brain. He was believable enough and relatable enough that, well, he's not, because I always thought wrestling was kind of corny, which it can be from time to time, right? Like, not the greatest acting in the world sometimes.
Of course.
Whatever reason, he was just, I believed his character. And so I was drawn towards him. And then I realized, I'd always had an interest in entertaining people. I was the guy that would stand up on a table and tell jokes at parties. And, I would do, when I was at basketball games in high school, I would do impersonations of the principal over the loudspeaker, just stuff like that. So I was always drawn towards acting and entertaining. And then I realized after a few months of watching that this is something special, and it incorporates all those things that I love. So then I sought out my first, I went home from a party one night and I was like, I'm gonna Google. Well, there was no Google at the time. It was like some AOL search engine or something like that. And I was like, I'm gonna find out if there's a wrestling school around here. And I thought, there's no way that there will be a wrestling school in Two Rivers, Wisconsin, or Green Bay, Wisconsin even. So I thought, I'm going to have to search one of the major cities like New York, Chicago, or LA. And I found one just outside of Chicago. It just so happened that that guy passed my number along to a guy in Green Bay who was starting up a wrestling school.
Awesome. What are the odds of that? So obviously you did obviously go through your training, but before you headed down to OVW, you did have a few tryout matches with WWE against the likes of S.A. Rios and William Regal. What was that experience like as kind of someone kind of training at that time?
It was nerve-wracking, to say the least. I remember the first time I got booked for extra work for WWE. It was in Chicago and Milwaukee, and it was like Monday Night Raw was in Chicago and SmackDown was in Milwaukee, or vice versa. And I remember going there and just stressed to the max all day. I'd only been in the business for just over a year at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm in catering and I'm standing in line behind Stone Cold Steve Austin, who, at this time was like an idol to me, and I have to act like I have to calm that fan inside of me that wants to mark out and just act like I'm at business. And so that was cool, and it was nerve-wracking getting in the ring, and there were times that I screwed things up. I remember one time I remember going there and thinking they have to notice me. Like, I have to do something that they'll notice me. And I remember I did the buckshot where the guy flipped over the rope. And I did that to get in the ring. And I remember Billy Gunn just stopped. And it was like this stare of death, like, I'm going to eat your face off if you do that again. right then and there. Nobody had to say anything to me, but I knew like I'm never going to do anything like that again. I'm not here to impress anybody. They'll be impressed by my work ethic and if I do my job correctly. And you said I had a bunch of matches. I had probably like 15 between dark matches and televised, like Monday night or Sunday night heat and velocity and stuff like that. 15 to 20, I would say. And I just kept progressively getting more and more comfortable until there was a, you know, and the thing is like the worst thing about the business is you go and you do that, you pour all of your energy into getting good at your craft. And then you go to Monday Night Raw or SmackDown as an extra or a pay-per-view or something like that. You get this opportunity and then nobody says anything to you at all. That's the worst. It's how was that? Good. That was it. You know, and I wouldn't hear a thing for months. However, I think in saying that, I was being noticed and they were noticing that, like, you know, when he comes here, he does what's asked of him. He goes out there. And I was progressively getting better and better, I think. And it just slowly built up to a time where I had enough people that were behind the scenes that were pulling for me. I had Paul Heyman, Arn Anderson, and Tommy Dreamer at one point, kind of all simultaneously saying like, hey, give this guy a shot. And it all just kind of, the chips all fell into place. And then my best friend, Sean Devari, got hired and was working for the company. And he really helped me out too. And helped massage those relationships that I had already built.
Awesome.
Wow. So
can I swear on here, or are you guys PG show?
Oh, but yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, fuck yeah. Okay.
Fuck yeah.
So while we're talking about obviously the early years there, is there any truth to the suggestion that you actually had an offer from Jeff Jarrett to join TNA before joining or signing with WWE?
Not exactly. I had gone down several times to do extra work for Impact or TNA at the time. And there was a time where a bunch of us were out at a karaoke bar after a show, and Jeff Jarrett happened to be there, and he, you know, we got into a conversation. He had taken a notice of the work that I had done that day, and he gave me his number and said, call me this week and we'll talk. And then I proceeded to call him for like the next 6 months, and I never got a return. It always went to voicemail, which is that's just the way the business goes. You know?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Nothing against Jeff. I do the same thing, unfortunately.
Yeah. So when you did make your way to OVW, you mentioned then about people kind of fighting for you a little bit. Now, I think you've mentioned previously maybe Jim Cornette didn't see you as the main event guy that you went on to be, but Paul Heyman was somebody who did kind of really fight for you. I'm just curious what's your relationship like with Paul? Do you still speak to him today at all?
You know, when I say that about Jim, it was just that's not a knock against Jim. It's just he's got, at that time, he had 50 other guys that were trying to get on OVW TV, which is an hour program.
Yeah.
You know, and there were guys that were there a lot longer than I had been. And I just was not, for whatever reason, I wasn't showing him what I could do. But Paul Heyman I had met Paul at a SmackDown taping, and he specifically had reached out to me and said, like, you know, I remember there was a time where he pulled me aside and started asking me questions. And when he found out that Brad Rangans had a hand in my training, Brad had trained Brock Lesnar, and Brad and Brock to this day are really good friends. That sort of, you know, opened the door a little bit more. And then he had seen me work, and quietly, I guess he said he was a fan of my work. And just when he got the pencil at OVW, he pulled me aside and said, you're the next guy out of here. I'm going to do so much stuff with you. I've been a fan of yours for a while now. And like, I really feel like there's something here and we're going to explore for it, and you're going to be on TV before you know it. And lo and behold, it was like 5 weeks later, I was making my debut.
Wow,
that's awesome. So obviously, you like one of the sort of things a lot of people remember is you obviously coming out and announcing yourself to the ring. So I just wondered, sort of, how did the idea of that come about? Is that something that you were sort of messing around with initially, or was that a suggestion? Or
it was really it was a couple of different things, again converging at one point. I had done announcing in high school. I announced some basketball games and football games, and I would always do the last name twice thing for our team, and for the other team, I would announce their names like super flat, and for our team, I would do the whole big intro. And then Paul Heyman one night, it was I think week 3. It might have even been the first night or second night that we were doing OVW television under Paul's pencil. And he just said, like, go out there. And Dean Hill was the ring announcer at the time, who was also like a play-by-play or commentator. And he just said, like, cut him off, cuss him out, dress him down, and then you do your own introduction and make it huge and extravagant. And then I just happened to remember doing the announcements when I was in high school, and it was something that I didn't even practice or think about. It was just in the moment. I just got up and I hit the last name twice. And when I came to the back, that was the thing that seemed to stick out in people's minds, was you got to keep doing that. I was just watching an interview, and this is the way it always happens. I was watching an interview with Chris Van Vliet and Lance Storm, where he asked Lance how he came up with the if I could be serious for a minute. And he said it was just it was a line in one particular promo, and after he hit it, he came back and people were like, you need to keep saying that. And that's just kind of how it goes.
Do you think, like, you knew at the time, or sort of coming back at the time, that it was going to be as sort of iconic or as synonymous with your character as it ended up being?
I felt at the time like that was sort of the edge that I needed to be recognized, to be memorable. I didn't think it was going to be. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, of course.
I don't think anybody could ever think that saying your last name twice will, from not being on TV, scraping your nickels together, to traveling the world for WWE and then Impact Wrestling, and
yeah,
it just goes to show it can come from anywhere, doesn't it?
Indeed.
But obviously,
the thing is like, people always, and I did this too when I was trying to break in, when I was trying to get a job with WWE. I used to ask Tom Pritchard, like, what do I need to do? Tommy Dreamer, what can I do? What are you guys looking for? And they would always say, like, we don't know. We honestly don't know what it is we're looking for, but we know when we see it. If we could bottle it and sell it, we would.
There's no silver bullet.
You have to try new things. You have to take calculated risks. You have to put yourself out there and not be afraid of being a boob, or being made fun of. You just gotta swing for the fences sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, it did enough for you to go on and get the United States Championship. Not that long after you kind of went to the main roster. So, how did you feel when you found out you'd be winning it? And also, how did you feel when you found out you'd only be kind of keeping it for just over a month?
So I've never viewed, and I realize, like, to be the world heavyweight championship, or to be the world heavyweight champion in these companies, is a big deal. However, at the end of the day, the titles are just props. And they're props used to tell stories or further storylines. And I've always felt that way. So it was cool to me, but like, I wasn't sleeping with the title. I don't have any pictures of the title on my mantelpiece, on my mantle, or anything like that. And the reason that I lost it so quickly was because Taker actually went to Vince and told him that he wanted to work a program with me. And
Right.
they always felt that the United States Championship was beneath Taker. So it was something that wouldn't further our storyline. So it was unnecessary for me to have it.
That makes a lot of sense. So obviously you were heavily involved in the main event scene with the likes of Bobby Lashley, Batista, and the like before going on to win the Money in the Bank. Now, sadly, obviously, you lost the Money in the Bank briefcase to Edge after an injury, which obviously didn't end up being as bad as initially thought. So I suppose I want to ask is, was there sort of a plan in place before the whole situation with the injury, or were they not sort of sure what they wanted to do with the execution of the Money in the Bank?
I remember having a discussion with creative, with Michael Hayes and Vince, saying I believe I came out the next night on it was either Raw or SmackDown. I don't even remember where I was at the time. I honestly bounced back and forth between the two. But wherever I was, I remember I cut a promo saying that I'm going to cash in this briefcase at next year's WrestleMania, and I was going to do that. That was the plan going forward. But then plans changed because they had wanted Taker to be the champion for a really long time. And he happened to tear his biceps and needed surgery. And so that was the plan that they came up with. Like, hey, we need to get this title off of Taker. This makes sense. We'll have, there was a cage match and he'll just barely eke out a victory. And then somebody else will come out and beat him up a little more. And then you'll come out and just pick the bones, basically. And they actually, I remember getting called into Vince's office, and Batista and I passed each other in the hallway, and he came up to me and just gave me a big hug, and he was like, dude, you deserve it. And I was before I had been told anything, and I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, I don't want to say anything more. Just go in there and talk to them. So I knew what was happening to a degree. And then it was just Stephanie and Vince, and they had that discussion with me. They just explained what I just explained to you. And then, so see you next week. And then the next weekend, we had house shows. We had a double shot in Poughkeepsie. And on the very first show was in some crazy like 8-man tag. Batista I was in the corner and Batista just pulled me out into a short clothesline, and I bumped and I felt something pop in my triceps. And then I rolled out to the floor, and it was immediately starting to swell up. By the time we got downstairs, it was turning colors, which is rare. So I thought like something's really wrong here. And then I went and had the MRI done. Hornswoggle drove me to the emergency room that night. And I had the MRI done. So then Stephanie called me the next day and said, hey, you tore your triceps off the bone, and we're going to have to still get that title off of Taker. So here's what we're going to do. And I didn't put up a stink at all. I was like, okay, this is, business is business. That makes sense. And so I flew in, did the thing. And then when I went down to Birmingham, Alabama the next day on Tuesday, and I sat on that table, and he just touched my arm. He didn't even look at the x-rays or the MRIs. He didn't have them. In fact, I ended up having to do another MRI. He's like, that's not a tear. I'm pretty sure that's not a tear. And sure enough, it wasn't. It was just a big bruise. And which is, that's happened to me. I don't know what it is about me, but I don't bruise easily, but I do bruise big. Like when I get hit, I'll get giant bruises on my one time somebody gave me a kitchen sink, and their knee was too low, and they hit me right in the middle of the quad, and my whole leg turned black and blue for like a month.
So obviously, unfortunately, you did end up getting released around about halfway through 2009. I know obviously you've spoken a couple of times around kind of circumstances around that and potential politics and things, and maybe Randy Orton having some kind of involvement in that. I'm just curious, like obviously as the years have gone on, have you spoken much to Randy since like what went down?
I did talk to him, but let me say this: like nobody got me fired. I got me fired. You know, like as the years wore on, right? Because I was very bitter and very upset for a few years, and that resentment was directed at the wrong place, and it should have been directed back at me, because had I been doing all the right things, I would have never been in a position where one person's word could have any effect on my career.
Yeah.
So the fact was that I was in a position at that time where I had done enough things, and Vince had heard my name in a negative light enough that he just finally said, like, I'm tired of hearing about it. We're just going to cut our losses. So I would have fired me. But we have talked, and I think both of us are in very different places in our lives right now. We're not like, you know, I don't call him, but I did run into him. I went backstage at a Monday Night Raw just like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
I had like a very long, pretty cool discussion with him. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Good.
So obviously following this, you ended up signing with TNA, which you find great success, winning the TNA World Title twice, being part of two of the biggest factions in the Immortal and Aces and Eights. So just wondered if you could sort of tell us some of your favorite memories from your time in TNA, I suppose.
Actually, my whole run there, I really, really enjoyed my time, right up to the end, right before the end. I had some fantastic killer, matchups with some of my heroes. I got to work with Jeff Jarrett in a program. I got to work with Kurt Angle in a program that, as a result, I've got one of my favorite matches in my personal history that I've been a part of was the cage match that I had with Kurt at Lockdown in 2009. The stuff with Sting, and of course, like the stuff with Bubba Ray, Bully Ray. Really, really, I remember, like, after our blow off match, we did the casket match, and it was over in Manchester, I want to say. And afterwards I was a little emotional, like, oh, fuck, we're not going to get to work with each other anymore. This is the end of the road for right now. That's sort of the way when you feel like you have a connection with somebody on a storytelling level. It's sometimes hard to say, all right, we've ridden this horse enough. Now it's time to get off and try a different one.
Yeah, obviously, you mentioned coming over to Manchester, and I think after your TNA run, you came over to like Scotland for ICW and to our neck of the woods for Preston City Wrestling as well. Just curious, obviously, what are your thoughts on wrestling in front of kind of UK fans and the British wrestling scene?
For a while I joked about, I was over there so much for those companies that I joked about getting a flat in London or Preston or Manchester or something, because I was spending so much time over there. And then I came over and I worked for the Knights. What's the name of their AAW or
WAW?
WAW, I think that's
working for the Knights. But the thing about the UK fans is I see this with soccer too, with football. Like, in the US, we have these like very sort of lame monosyllabic chants: "Go Pack, go! Go Pack, go!" And over there, you guys will do like an entire soliloquy. There once was a man from Nantucket who's everybody in the crowd. It's just crazy. I love it. I've had more fun wrestling in front of a crowd of 800 people in Preston. I remember one of my most memorable experiences was I was working for PCW, and we were at that Evoke nightclub, and I was the special every year for the Halloween show. He would do like a special, there would be a surprise guest that he wouldn't advertise, right? And so I came out, and it would always be the Grim Reaper. He would have the Grim Reaper come out. So I came out in this Grim Reaper outfit. And I remember the build up to this too. He was like, "Hey, I want you to be Super Mario." And when he initially booked me, I was like, okay, whatever. And then as the day got closer, I was like, you don't really want me to be Super Mario, right? Like, you were just kidding. And he's like, no, man, no, it'll be a big deal. It'll be cool. And I was stressed out the week before. I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm doing this Mario thing. It's gonna be so stupid. And he talked me into it on the day, and I'm so glad he did, because it was me and Viper, Dewdrop, right? Teaming up. I was Mario, she was Princess Peach, and we teamed up against Nick Aldis and Mickey James. And there was one point where everybody in the crowd started da 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 da, and there were 800 people that did the entire Mario song. It was just
that's brilliant.
You don't run into that in the US or anywhere else for that matter. I don't know what that is. You guys freaking go crazy over darts.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
any excuse to just chant something crazy.
Yeah. Well, you see it all the time in well, I'll say soccer, but in football, you like we love a good chant. To be fair, yeah. So obviously you also made the transition from wrestling into acting. So I just wondered firstly how the opportunity to start in Behind the Enemy Line, came about.
They had just started doing those movies, right? They did the Condemned with Austin. I think there was their first one, and then they did the Kane movie. And so we knew that WWE was venturing into the movie realm, and I got a call from somebody in the office that said, "Hey, we want you to do." I believe it was Mark Carano actually called me and said, like, "Hey, we're gonna have you audition for this role in a little movie coming up." And it was me and probably 10 to 20 other people. I remember Batista was in there. I remember Brian Kendrick was in there. I remember, I think The Miz was in there. And I just read for this role. And then a week later, somebody called me back and said, "Hey, we want to offer you the role. Here's how much we're going to pay you." And it was a relatively, I was super excited about it. I have to say, because that was always sort of a dream of mine when I was a kid. Like, how do I do this, Mom? I remember seeing E.T. with my mom in the theaters and going like, I want to be Elliot. Like, how do I do that? I just never thought that would be possible. And then the cool thing is we went to Puerto Rico. I was there for, I think we shot 22 days. We filmed that movie in like 22 days, I think. It was long hours. And I just sort of realized like how different our two worlds are. The movie world, the way that they treat you is so much different from the way that you get treated in the wrestling world. One time it was like we were going on 8 hours of filming, and we were coming up on 8 hours. And the assistant director was like, guys, we have to get this shot in the next 15 minutes or we're screwed. And I just pulled her aside and I was like, "Hey, like, just stay until it's done, you know?" And she was like, oh no, that's not how it works here. She's like, they have these very strict rules from the Screen Actors Guild that if you go past 8 hours, you have to pay everybody a lot more money. And then if you go past like, I think it's like 2 or 3 hours past, then it's golden time where everybody gets 5 times their day rate and stuff like that. So, and I remember coming out of my trailer. I had a trailer, and I remember coming out of my trailer, and somebody would offer to like carry my bags for me, and I was, "No, I'm cool, I got it." And in the wrestling business, if somebody would carry your bags, you would never hear the end of it.
Yeah. Very.
I'll go do independent gigs, and every once in a while, like the promoter will pick me up and they'll get out and they'll grab my bag, and I'm like, no, I have to like fight with them. No, I got my fucking bag. I'm good.
I mean, we've seen you in some other stuff as well, like Emergency LA and a couple of other kind of TV bits and stuff. But you still got an interest in acting? Is that something you'd?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And for a while I had moved to New York. I had an agent. I was really working, hard at that. But I don't know. I sort of got away from it. I fell out of love with the wrestling business a little bit. I'm back in love. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely something that I would take a stab at again.
Yeah. And speaking of LA, obviously, you know, you worked with LA Knight when he was Eli Drake in NWA. Some comparisons being made a little bit between kind of you two as kind of characters and stuff. What was it like working with him? What do you make of his kind of recent kind of surge in popularity?
Oh, I remember at the time when I was working with him, thinking nobody can touch this guy on the mic. He's just,
Yeah.
he doesn't have to have a script either. Doesn't need a script. He can just pick up a microphone and go. He's very thoughtful. He's very, and he takes it very, very seriously. He's a hard worker. And they always say, like, you know, you work super hard, you will be rewarded. He would, you know, remember he would be, one time my wife cooked up a bunch of food and brought it to an NWA taping. It was like chicken breast and steaks and vegetables and some rice or something like that, right? And she was like, she offered him, like, would you like some chicken breasts? And I remember like seeing him do the math in his head, like, can I have these calories? It was chicken breasts, you know? He was like very, very strict on his diet, his intake and stuff. And it obviously it shows in his the way that he looks. He's where he needs to be. And I think he'll go further.
Yeah.
I'm very proud of him.
So obviously while we're touching on the current product, do you find you're able to watch much wrestling these days? And if so, do you have any thoughts on the likes of AEW All In setting the attendance record and like?
Just good for them, you know, like that stuff really, really makes me happy that there are alternatives out there. When I was with WWE, TNA was there, but it really wasn't a viable alternative. Not for lack of trying, I think. Not for lack of talent. It was just whatever reason it just never clicked. But it's really nice to see that there's another company out there. There's all these like super indies out there. There's wrestling's hot right now, and I hope it stays that way. I hope we can continue to make some changes along the way so that it doesn't just get stagnant and and fall away again. So it's really cool. I don't watch a whole lot of wrestling. However, when when I hear somebody will tell me, hey, you got to check out this match, and I'll watch it. The last match that I really got into, and I watched it like 5 or 6 times, was the Sami Zayn Roman Reigns match. I know that's like months ago already, but like that thing, they didn't touch it. The fact that they didn't touch each other, the bell rang and they still didn't touch each other for 4.5 minutes says a lot about storytelling and how powerful storytelling can be. It's not just moves, you know?
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
I mean, speaking of like the current product and hoping it kind of stays in the boom, you know, you currently own and operate the Academy School of Professional Wrestling, which has been a huge success itself, seeing like a number of graduates going on to WWE and AEW. Just wondering, what was your motivation behind starting the school? Obviously, was it one of your best friends, Davari, and Molly Holly as well, helping set that up?
I remember spinning my wheels a lot. What do we have to do? You know, I'd be in these car rides with Davari. We'd have 6 to 15-hour car rides when we were going and doing indie shots, and just like, what do we do? What do we do? And I figured those out. I figured those answers out, and I wanted to have a place where people could learn and not have to spin their wheels so much. Like, this is what they're looking for. This is, you know, I made a lot of mistakes, and they were just minor mistakes, and there were sometimes mistakes because I just didn't know any better. But yeah, and I want to teach people from the ground up. That goes for like etiquette, business etiquette, how to conduct yourself in the locker room. I've had a lot of mistakes that I've made over my career, and I'm able to draw upon those and then pass them on to my students in the hopes that they don't have to make those same mistakes. But I've also had some successes too, and like to be able to share those with people. And so far, we've had a good run. I've got several people, like several of my students are currently either in AEW or NXT. So it's really cool to see. And there's plenty more that are coming. There's some people right now that have been stewing on the independent scene in the Midwest here for like 2 or 3 years. And I really think if they push it, they can get to the next level.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you mentioned on the Kurt Angle show that one of the things you teach is don't be a dick, which, to be honest, is something we say and we believe in strongly as well. So I just wondered if you could sort of tell us more about your thoughts on sort of that lesson, I suppose, and that inclusivity and giving everyone an opportunity,
Yeah, like coming up in the business when I did, I saw a lot of things where people were treated really poorly. And I just thought, like, why? Why do we have to do that? Why do we have to have this this good old boys network here, this good old boys club? And in saying that, I've had several students over the years who, if they had gone to another school, they would have gotten an opportunity. Somebody would have run them out of the building. They would have beat them up. They would have not physically beat them up, but like they would have made them do push-ups and squats and bumps until they just said, I can't fucking do this anymore, and quit. And I have stuck with people like that, and I've taken the time to get to know them and to figure out, like, okay, this person is not responding to this type of training, and then trying to figure out, like, how can they learn? And really, some of those people have gone on to figure it out and to be important fixtures in the scene, And we would have, had I been a dick and allowed everybody else to be a dick to those people, we wouldn't get to watch those people perform.
Yeah. It's made a real difference. You can see, to obviously, as you say, to allowing people that opportunity they wouldn't have already had. I think, you mentioned like some of your students going on. So, like, to start with AEW, obviously Darius and Dante Martin, as well as Julia Hart. But what have you made of their success? They've all gone on to do so well for themselves.
I'm just like, I couldn't be happier for those guys. I'm hoping that, Darius had 2 back-to-back significant injuries, and I know what that's like. So, a couple stops and starts. And now Dante is in that same boat. But it's just really cool. It's cool to see people like Julia, like my wife just retweeted something last weekend. Julie was in the ring at All Out. It's just, I remember what it was like having those first experiences. This is the first time doing this. This is the first time on pay-per-view. And I'm just so proud of them, and I'm able to live vicariously through them to a certain degree.
That's awesome. So from a WWE standpoint, obviously you got other trainees such as Von Wagner, Tiffany Stratton, and Gable Steveson. So just wondered what it was like, or I suppose, was the experience any different in helping train them, and was there involvement from WWE with it being sort of, the behemoth that it is, or was the involvement not really there until a certain point, sort of thing?
Oh, there was no involvement with WWE at all. Like, I'm not affiliated with the company at all. I don't have any.
No, of course.
But it just so happens that, like, Tiffany came to our school at the behest of Greg Gagne. Greg Gagne is like a family friend, and said, hey, this girl wants to get into the business, I think. And she had a background. Obviously, she's got an athletic background,
Yeah.
So I just like, hey, she can come start in the class. She's gonna do all the squats and all the bullshit like everybody else does. And she took to it, and she spent there were nights where I would be at home and she was still in the ring with a couple of the other students. She'd come in on Saturdays and Sundays and get extra ring time. So she busted her ass. Same thing with Gable. Gable reached out to me. He had been under contract with WWE for just about a year, and he's like, "Hey, I haven't started yet. Can you teach me?" So I brought him in, and you know, taught him I remember the first day he came in. Like I said, he'd been under WWE contract and had been drafted to Monday Night Raw for like 8 months. And I said, "What do you know how to do?" And he's like, "Nothing." And I said, like, have you hit the ropes?" "No, I don't know how to do anything." So we started from literally square one.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that he, again, I hate to, I know people are always going to compare him to Kurt Angle. I wish they wouldn't. Mm-hmm. But people do say that Kurt took to the business very quickly. And I feel like Gable really, really, I would show him. In fact, the first day I was teaching bumps, basic bumps. And I told him, like, get up this way. I told him specifically, like, put your elbow down, turn to the left, and or turn to the right. And he did it, and he got up the wrong way. And I didn't even say anything. And he like froze, and then he reversed himself and got up the right way. It was like, just stuff like that doesn't happen very often. It's usually like I have to continuously, no, do it this way, do it this way, do it this way. I didn't have to correct him much.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know. Something I think is fascinating about obviously the academy. You've mentioned that not everyone graduates from the school. Like, I know a lot of like wrestling things do like, oh, here's a camp and everyone gets like a thing at the end and that kind of thing. But I'm just wondering what is your kind of, what are the key attributes that you need to have in order to graduate from the academy?
You have to be able to perform on a regular basis where a promoter will book you and rebook you. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets a chance, but will that promoter continue to use you? Are you able to work with not only people that are better than you, but people who aren't as experienced as you, and carry that match and take that match to something that's, watchable? Because you're always, look, if you get into this business, you will get paired up with you will be working for some wrestling promotion that shouldn't be there, and you'll be paired up with an individual who's untrained or doesn't have very much training. And like, you have to be able to recognize that and try to elevate the other person rather than just making them look bad. We want to always try to work for just the match itself instead of worrying about getting, I don't want to worry about just me getting over. I want the company as a whole, the match as a whole to get over. So that, and I just, you don't have to have like the best physique in the world, but like, this is you have to have a look.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, you have to take pride in how you present yourself. So that's really it. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's my opinion, and it's my wife's opinion, and a couple other people that I sort of like from time to time, I'll ask other graduates, like, hey, what do you think about this person? How are they doing? And I think we're usually spot on. We just graduated 3 people the other day, and I hadn't graduated anybody for almost, it was like 8 or 9 months since we had the last graduation. Mm-hmm. And for a long time, there was one person on that list, and I didn't want this one person to graduate by himself. So I kept holding off. And I'm sure that person was like, wow, never said anything, just every night would shake my hand and go about their business. They would come in, they'd be the first person there, the last person to leave. They put in extra time in the ring. And then there were 2 other people that like, you just know when you see it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll pair them up for matches and I'll just, they've got it. And then I usually you know, because anybody can have a fluke, anybody can have like one good match, but then when it's consistent, okay, this person's good to go. And the 3 people that I graduated this last time they are definitely good to go.
Awesome.
Yeah. So you've mentioned obviously working with the Undertaker earlier in the show, and you've actually talked a lot about learning from the Undertaker and his appreciation for your selling and things like that. So I just wonder was there ever any sort of piece of advice from the Undertaker or any of your other peers that you've sort of taken with you to this day?
Just that, like what you just alluded to a little bit there when you said like he put me over for my selling. He did tell me at that time, because what it was like I would crawl away from him, like I was trying to get away from him, and I'd grab onto the ropes, and he would come to pull me off the ropes, and I wouldn't just go with him. I'd hug the ropes and then make him like stomp me or do something to me, and then I would go with him. He'd put me in the corner, and I would turtle up, you know, and then I would make him hit me, open me up, and he just said like, keep doing stuff like that, but know that there are people that you will cross in the business that won't appreciate that, and you have to sort of navigate those waters. And I wish I had taken his advice at the time. I didn't. But yeah, it's just, you got to know who you're in the ring with. And, you know, that goes for everybody. It goes for like newbies and ring veterans. You know, like if I'm in the ring with somebody that's 5 or 10 years my senior and respected in the business, like it's still, what do you want to do? I'm going to work with Chavo Guerrero next week. What do you want to do, Chavo? You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, good advice. So you mentioned previously that WWE might have discussed your name at one point in time for a potential Rumble appearance. Obviously, since we've seen the likes of, you know, Carlito and MVP and people like that come back, if the call came in 2024, would it be something you'd be interested in?
It's definitely something that I'd think about it for sure.
Oh,
yeah.
Never say never.
So, yeah. We want to see that entrance.
We want to see that.
Yeah. So the last one from us really would be obviously you as you mentioned before, you're sort of back in the world of wrestling. You've recently taken on the likes of JTG and Eric Redbeard. So I just wondered, is there anyone that you haven't faced yet who you'd sort of like to face?
Oh boy.
Yeah, I'm aware there could probably quite a list.
You know, there's some of my students, some of my graduates that I would really like to face off with. JDX, I actually have wrestled him, but he was a lot greener than. There's a guy by the name of JDX. There's a guy by the name of Rampage Santana, Cho. I don't know. It's nice to be able to get in with those people and you know, create this storytelling thing we do.
Yeah, definitely. Ken, honestly, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before we let you go, can you let everyone know kind of more about the academy, how they can keep up to date with everything else that you've got going on at the minute?
Yeah, definitely. If you're interested in getting into the business, please reach out to me. And it just you don't have to be living in the Twin Cities area. If you live anywhere in the US or in the world and you'd like information, I'd like to help you and make sure that I set you on the right path and find you a good wrestling school, even if it's not here. But my number is 507-722-2776. And that comes directly to me or to my wife. That goes for bookings too. I take bookings through that. You can text me or call me at that number. Also, you can find me on Twitter. It's Mr. Ken Anderson, Mr. Ken Anderson. On Instagram, it's Mr. spelled out Mister Ken Anderson, and I'm on Facebook and everything else. So
awesome. Ken, honestly, thank you so much. Absolute dream guest. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you guys.